That morning began just like thousands of others in our 28th floor apartment, overlooking the London skyline, which was slowly waking up from its slumber. The air was still crisp, holding the last breath of the night's dew. This freshness seeped through the slightly opened balcony window, which I always deliberately left ajar. I had always loved this atmosphere, this thick silence. It felt as though the massive city was holding its breath for a brief moment. Just before the endless hustle began, I stepped soundlessly across the cold marble floor. I had developed this habit over many years so as not to wake Crispin, my husband, the center of my universe for the past 11 years. My morning routine was almost a soothing ritual: brew black coffee, linger on the balcony for a moment to feel the breeze on my face, and then head to the bathroom to get ready. Everything was on autopilot, movements my muscles knew by heart. In the bathroom, decorated in shades of ivory and brushed gold, I turned on the hot water to wash my face and started brushing my teeth. The foam of the mint toothpaste with its sharp taste filled my mouth. And that was exactly when, amidst the monotonous motions of the toothbrush, I saw it. Crispin's mobile phone was lying on the marble vanity next to a nearly empty bottle of liquid soap. Its screen, previously pitch black, suddenly lit up, emitting a glare that cut my eyes in the dimness of the bathroom. A notification appeared on the lock screen. It wasn't a message from a workgroup chat, nor a calendar reminder. The sender's name was unfamiliar to me, a name I had never heard from Crispin's lips: Saffron. And beneath that name was a short sentence, a sentence that was enough to make my world stop. I can't wait for our weekend at the lake cottage. Got the wine and that luxury lingerie set I bought, starting the countdown. The movement of my hand stopped abruptly. The toothbrush was still in my mouth, but I couldn't feel anything anymore. The fresh mint foam now took on a strange, bitter taste, slowly dissolving and dripping down the corners of my lips. My eyes were glued to the phone screen. I reread the phrase over and over, as if looking for a different meaning, an alternative possibility, even the slightest hint of a misunderstanding. Our lake cottage, the lingerie. Every word was a nail driven straight into my heart. Through the frosted glass door of the shower, I heard the sound of water. Crispin was taking a shower. I could hear him quietly humming. It was an old jazz tune he always played in the car. The sound of falling water and his careless humming felt like a mockery. I stood there, paralyzed by the proof of betrayal unfolding before my eyes with brutal clarity. And he, just a few steps away from me, was starting his day without any burden, unaware that his world, our world, had just sustained an irreversible crack. The phone screen went dark again, but the phrase was already imprinted in my brain, burned onto my retinas. I didn't need to unlock his phone. I didn't need to know more. What I felt in that moment wasn't an explosive shock. Rather, it was a confirmation. The feeling that the final piece of a terrible puzzle I had tried so hard to ignore had finally fallen into place. Over the past few months, there had been many little things that seemed strange to me. Crispin had started staying late at work more often, using sudden meetings in the city as an excuse. Unexpected business trips to Edinburgh or Manchester were announced so abruptly that I barely had time to ask for details. His phone, which he used to leave lying around anywhere, was now always placed face down on the table or safely tucked in his trousers pocket. He even took it to the bathroom with him. A new password had appeared on his laptop, which I previously could use at any time. But what hurt me the most was his gaze. His eyes, which had always looked at me with warmth, with the feeling of coming home, now often slid past me, as if I were just another piece of furniture in the apartment. Like a painting on the wall that, after long observation, no longer attracts attention. I often tried to calm myself down. "Don't be paranoid, Alara," I would whisper to myself on sleepless nights waiting for him. "Everyone gets tired. Marriage takes effort. Don't create problems out of thin air." Now, standing in front of the sink with a mouthful of toothpaste, I wanted to go back in time and scream at myself. "Don't be a fool, Alara. Stop making excuses for him." I turned on the faucet, quickly rinsed my mouth, and splashed cold water on my face. My hands weren't shaking when I dried off with a towel. Strangely enough, I felt an emptiness, a cold, vast emptiness. It felt as though my soul had detached from my body and was observing everything from the corner of the room. I watched myself continue my routine, applying moisturizer, a little powder, a neutral shade of lipstick. It all felt like a theatrical performance. When I walked out of the bathroom, Crispin was already dressed. He stood in front of the large mirror in our bedroom, adjusting his navy blue silk tie. He saw me in the reflection and smiled, the same smile as every morning, a smile that now seemed to me the most disgusting mask I had ever seen. I have a seminar with clients in Edinburgh this weekend, darling, he said, adjusting his shirt collar. I probably won't be back until Sunday evening. Will you be okay by yourself? I nodded slowly. My voice sounded more even than I expected. No emotion, no trembling. Of course. Don't forget to pack a warm jacket. The nights in the north can be chilly. I didn't ask about Saffron. I didn't ask about the lingerie. I didn't want to ruin the play he had so carefully staged. Because in my cold and empty mind, something else was beginning to take shape. A plan, a scenario for a counterattack. And until everything was perfectly prepared, I wouldn't say a word. I was going to play my role flawlessly, too. Just as he did that morning, I became the best actress in the drama of his betrayal. I gave him the smile of a loving wife, even though the love that had once burned in my heart had now turned to cold ash. And from that ash, something harder and sharper was beginning to grow. That evening felt longer than usual. The hands on the wall clock moved with an infuriating slowness. Every tick echoed in the silence of the apartment. Crispin came home on time with a box of artisanal chocolates from our local boutique bakery. A small gesture that in other times would have warmed my heart. But that evening, it felt like an empty formality, an attempt to hide his lies behind the sweetness of sugar and cream. We had dinner together, chatting about trivial things, his work at the corporate office, a new project I was immersed in, the ever-worsening London traffic. On the outside, everything seemed normal, the facade of a happy marriage that we played so masterfully. I had turned into a meticulous observer. I watched Crispin place his phone face down on the table, watched his eyes occasionally dart toward the device as if drawn by an invisible magnet. I watched his smile, which never reached his eyes. Every small detail was just another piece of evidence reinforcing the certainty that had settled in my mind that morning. Crispin had a habit. Every Thursday night after playing squash with his friends, he would come home, drink 2 glasses of single malt scotch, and go to bed. It was his stress relief ritual. And I knew that after those 2 pours of whiskey, he would fall into a deep sleep, like a stone, dreamless, deaf to the world around him. That evening was a Thursday, a coincidence that felt like destiny. I waited until his breathing became steady and deep. The faint scent of scotch mixed with the aroma of soap in the cool air of the bedroom, chilled by the ventilation system. I lay next to him, staring at the dark ceiling, allowing my racing heart to slowly return to a normal rhythm. It was time. Like a thief in my own home, I got out of bed with utmost caution. I walked over to his side. The phone was charging on the nightstand. The white cable was plugged into the outlet, like an umbilical cord giving it life. I slowly unplugged it. I knew his fingerprint, his right index finger. For years, I had unlocked his phone to set an alarm or answer a call while he was driving. An act that used to be based on trust was now the key to his Pandora's box. I took his relaxed hand. His skin was warm. For a second, a fleeting memory washed over me. The first time this hand had held mine so tightly, so confidently, I quickly pushed the memory away. No time for nostalgia. I gently pressed the pad of his index finger against the scanner. Click. The screen lit up, revealing perfectly sorted apps. My heart beat a little faster. There was no turning back. I didn't go straight to his text messages. I started with the photo gallery, swiping through hundreds of photos of us together. Holidays in the Cotswolds, my birthday party, candid shots he took when I wasn't looking. It all felt like relics from another person's life. And then I found it, his hidden folder. It took me a couple of tries to guess the passcode. His birthday turned out to be far too obvious. Inside was a different world, the world of Crispin and Saffron. Their selfies in the car, photos in dimly lit coffee shops, and the most painful of all, a photo of them together with a stone house in the background that looked painfully familiar. Our cottage in the Lake District. The very one we bought 2 years ago using my year-end bonus as a wedding anniversary gift. The place where we were supposed to build our shared memories. He was already building them, just not with me. There was even a photo of Saffron alone, smiling triumphantly at the camera, wearing one of Crispin's button-down shirts. Nausea rose in my throat. I swallowed it down and kept going. After the photos, I opened his messages. Their thread was a novel of betrayal. Pet names, plans for secret rendezvous, Crispin complaining about me that I was too absorbed in my work, that I was too cold, that I didn't care about him. Every sentence was a slap in the face. He painted me as the villain in his story, making it seem like this affair was my fault. And then I found more information about Saffron. Her full name was Saffron Thorpe. a medical equipment sales representative for a major pharmaceutical company. And most importantly, in an older thread, I found a phrase that changed everything. Barnaby is going to be in Birmingham all next week for work. The cottage will be empty. Barnaby, her husband. So Saffron was a traitor too. This wasn't just a problem between me and Crispin. There was another wounded person in this game. Another person getting his heart broken while completely clueless. In that exact moment, a larger, bolder idea formed in my mind. This was no longer about a wife's revenge. It was a matter of justice. I didn't sleep a wink that night. My hands, now cold and resolute, got to work. I took screenshots of all the key conversations and every photo in that hidden folder. I tracked the transactions on Crispin's credit card, which was linked to mine, hotel payments in Edinburgh on dates when he supposedly had meetings, receipts from expensive restaurants we had never been to together. I saved everything, archiving it into a secure folder on my own laptop. In one night, I had transformed into a detective, piecing together the fragments of my husband's double life. By dawn, I found what I was looking for. I typed the name Barnaby Thorpe into a professional networking site and added the keyword architect, which had been mentioned in their texts, and there he was. The profile picture showed a man with a strong jawline, slightly messy hair, and a smile that, though tired, looked genuine. His profile stated he was the director of an architectural firm specializing in sustainable design. A pang of sympathy for this man pricked my heart. He was a victim just like me. I sat in front of my laptop in the dark living room, illuminated only by the glow of the screen. I typed a short message, deleted it, and wrote it again. I did this dozens of times, searching for the right words. Finally, I stopped thinking and let my fingers move on their own. Hello, Barnaby. My name is Alara Weaver. I am convinced that my husband, Crispin, is having an affair with your wife, Saffron. If you want to know more, I can share the evidence I have. Here is my number. I stared at the phrase for a few minutes. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. I took a deep breath and clicked. The message was sent. Crispin's phone was already back in its place, as if no one had touched it. The morning sun began to peek through the London skyscrapers. A new day had begun, and my war was about to break out. The time after clicking the send button dragged on with agonizing slowness. Every second felt like a grain of sand resisting the fall in an hourglass. I went back to the bedroom, placed Crispin's phone exactly where it had been, and returned to the living room. I sat on the soft sofa, but my body was tense. My morning coffee, usually so delicious, now left only a sour taste on my tongue. Outside the window, London began to stretch its limbs. The distant sound of a taxi horn, the hum of engines starting. Everything sounded detached and muffled, as if I were inside a soundproof bubble. I gripped my phone in my hand. It felt as heavy as a grenade with the pin already pulled. All I could do was wait. Wait for the explosion or for the worst possible outcome that nothing would happen. What if Barnaby didn't believe me? What if he thought I was a crazy, jealous woman trying to ruin his marriage? Or worse, what if he called Saffron to confront her, and Saffron told Crispin everything? My plan would crumble before it even started. I would look like a fool, a pathetic figure. Thoughts swarmed in my head like a flock of crows. I tried to chase them away by turning on the TV, opening my laptop to check work emails, but it was all in vain. My concentration was shattered. The numbers in the spreadsheets, which usually seemed so neat and logical, now seemed to dance pointlessly. Alara Weaver, a financial director known for her calm demeanor and ability to control the most complex situations, now felt she had lost control over the only thing that truly mattered, her own life. An hour later, Crispin walked out of the bedroom. He was wearing a flawless, light blue button-down shirt. His damp hair was combed back. He gave me a light kiss on the forehead, a gesture so automatic I barely felt it. "I'm heading out," he said. "I'll call you when I get to Edinburgh." "Drive safe," I replied, forcing a smile. As he walked to the door, I felt an overwhelming urge to scream at him, to shove him into all his lies right that second, but I held back. Hot, explosive anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. My anger was cold, icy. I was sharpening it until it became a weapon. After Crispin left, the apartment felt even quieter and emptier. All morning, I paced from the living room to the kitchen and back. Every time my phone vibrated with an email notification or a work chat message, my heart leaped into my throat. 3 hours felt like 3 years. I was ready to give up, to convince myself that this was a stupid idea. When the phone finally rang, an unknown number flashed on the screen. My hand trembled slightly as I swiped the green icon. I stepped out onto the balcony to get some fresh air and calm my racing heart. "Hello," I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. There was silence on the other end, just heavy breathing. Then a male voice answered, deep and exhausted. "This is Barnaby Thorpe. I received your message." His voice was exactly as I had imagined. Calm on the surface. But I could feel a hidden tremor. The tremor of a foundation that had just cracked. "Thank you for calling," I said. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked directly. No preamble. I like that. "I wish it were," I replied. My throat was dry, but I'm afraid not. I have proof. Texts, photos, even their plans for this weekend. I heard him sigh heavily. The sigh of a man whose world had just been turned upside down. This weekend, Saffron told me she was going to the Lake District for a corporate retreat with her colleagues. His voice sounded like he was talking more to himself than to me. "My husband told me he was going to a client seminar in Edinburgh," I countered. "They are planning to meet at our cottage in Cumbria." The mention of the Lake District cottage hit like a physical blow. The silence on the line grew thicker. "A cottage. The cottage I bought," I continued. "The cottage that perhaps you designed? We were both betrayed in a space that rightfully belonged to us. What do you want?" he finally asked. Hesitation seeped through his words. This was the crucial moment. I took a deep breath and gathered all my courage. "I want us to catch them there together before they even have a chance to uncork the wine or take off their jackets." Silence again. I could imagine Barnaby on the other end of the line processing my words. A crazy request. A scene straight out of a film. I was prepared for him to refuse, to call me insane. "I don't want a scandal," he said after a moment. "I don't want screaming." "Neither do I replied quickly. "I just want them to see us. I want them to face the truth without any room for new lies or excuses." I heard his breathing again, feeling the internal conflict raging within him. The desire to run away from this bitter reality fought against the urge to look it in the eye. "All right," he said at last. That single word carried immense weight. It was filled with resignation and resolve. "But let's meet first. I want to see everything, with my own eyes." A wave of relief washed over my body, making my knees weak. I wasn't alone. I had an ally. "Of course," I said. We agreed on a time and place to meet the next day, Saturday morning, at a motorway service station right off the M6. On the way north, neutral territory, halfway between our divided worlds. Hanging up, I stayed on the balcony, looking out at the city now buzzing with life. My mood had shifted. The emptiness I felt in the morning was now filled with a clear purpose, a strange alliance forged in identical pain. We were two strangers united by betrayal, and we were going to face this storm together. On Saturday morning, the sky was gray, as if the weather itself felt the tension hanging in the air. I drove alone up the busy motorway. The music that usually accompanied me on road trips now felt like an irritating distraction. So, I turned the radio off. The only sound was the hum of tires on the asphalt and the steady purr of the engine. My mind was boiling. I ran through all the possible scenarios of what might happen when I met Barnaby. I arrived at the service station half an hour early. It was fairly crowded. Families heading out for a weekend getaway and lorry drivers stopping for a break. I picked an inconspicuous booth in the corner of the cafe, ordered black coffee and took a seat with a clear view of the entrance. I could see everyone walking in and out. Every time the door opened, my heart beat a little faster. At exactly 10 a.m., a tall man in a light brown jacket walked in. His stride was purposeful, but his shoulders were slightly hunched, as if carrying an invisible weight. I recognized him instantly from his profile picture. Barnaby. The exhaustion in his eyes was much more real in person. He looked around and his eyes met mine. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. I gave a slight nod. He walked over to my booth and sat in the chair opposite me without saying a word. Without formal greetings, without introductions. We already knew each other in the strangest and most painful way possible. "Order something," I suggested, trying to break the awkward silence. He shook his head. "No, thank you. Let's get straight to it." I sighed and pulled my phone out of my handbag. I placed it on the table between my coffee cup and a small bottle of hand sanitizer. I opened the gallery, navigated to the folder I had prepared, and slid the phone toward him. "Here," I said quietly. Barnaby stared at the phone for a few moments before picking it up. He had large, strong hands. The hands of an architect, a man who builds things. The irony was cruel. The hands that had built so much were now forced to hold the evidence of what had been destroyed. He started swiping the screen with his thumb. I watched his face closely. I saw his jaw clench as he read the affectionate texts between Crispin and Saffron. I saw a muscle twitch in his temple at the sight of their selfies, smiling happily. I saw him hold his breath looking at the credit card statements, hotel bookings, and romantic dinners. But the strongest reaction came from one specific photo, a photo of Saffron posing on the deck of the Lake District cottage. I saw his hand grip the phone, his knuckles turned white, and his eyes focused on the details in the background. The wooden beams he had selected, the design of the railings, the floor tiles. In that moment, I realized he wasn't just looking at a picture of his unfaithful wife. He was seeing betrayal inside his own masterpiece. He saw lies desecrating the space he had created with his own sweat and imagination. He placed the phone back on the table very slowly, as if it were fragile crystal. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes for a second, and let out an incredibly heavy sigh. Those floor tiles. I picked them out myself, he rasped. Every small detail of that house I chose. Saffron used to say she didn't really like going up there, that it was too quiet. He let out a dry laugh devoid of any humor. Turns out she just didn't like going up there with me. Silence enveloped our booth. I gave him time to process it all. I knew this pain, the pain of realizing that a place you considered sacred had been violated. I suspected it, he spoke again, staring blankly out the window. For a long time, she was becoming more distant, getting angry over trivial things. She refused to have serious conversations or go to marriage counseling. She always said I worked too much, that I had no time for her. Now I understand. She didn't need my time because she was giving all of hers to someone else. It was my turn to share Crispin's story. How the little lies piled up into a mountain. About my ignored feelings. About how our financial situation was stretched thin because of Crispin's lavish lifestyle, a fact she probably didn't even know about. We talked for almost an hour. Not like two strangers, but like two people in the same boat, caught together in a storm of betrayal. We were no longer alone. I still have a spare key to the cottage, Barnaby said suddenly. His eyes now looked directly into mine with a new gleam, a gleam of resolve. Saffron doesn't know I kept it. Crispin thinks I'm on a business trip in Birmingham this weekend. She couldn't even imagine that I'd be anywhere near Cumbria. Then we'll go first, Barnaby continued. We'll wait for them there. But as I said, no screaming or scandals. We will just sit there, let them see us, and the truth will do the rest. I was in complete agreement. Our plan now felt real, tangible. We ironed out the details. They would arrive around 6 p.m. the next day. We would be there early in the morning to set our stage. We would be both the audience and the main characters in the final act of our marriages. When we parted ways outside the cafe, there was no handshake, no long goodbyes, just a brief nod, a silent understanding. We were partners in this painful mission. Driving back home, I felt strange. My burden hadn't gotten lighter, but I was no longer carrying it alone. There was someone else who understood it, someone else who would stand beside me when the storm broke. The sky remained gray, but I felt like I saw a faint ray of light in the distance. Not a light of hope to fix what was already broken, but the light of ultimate closure. And for now, that was enough. On Sunday morning, I drove out of the city while the sky was still painted a pale purple. The roads were empty, allowing me to drive in silence, accompanied only by my thoughts. As I left London behind, the air coming through the cracked window grew cleaner. I began to catch the scent of pine and crisp lake water. The Lake District, a place that was supposed to be a sanctuary, a keeper of sweet memories, now it felt like a battlefield I was marching toward. The cottage stood somewhat secluded at the end of a dirt road surrounded by dense woods. As I turned onto the gravel driveway, I saw it. A two-story stone structure that seemed to blend in with the surrounding nature. Beautiful, serene, and full of lies. I parked my car next to the silver estate car already sitting there. Barnaby's car. He had arrived. My heart beat a little faster. This was reality. This was actually happening. I grabbed my bag from the passenger seat and, taking a deep breath to steady myself, stepped out of the car. The morning air was cool and slightly damp. In the distance, the rustling of the wind through the trees served as a melancholic soundtrack. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it slowly and walked in. Barnaby was standing in front of the large living room window that looked directly out onto the lake. In his hands, he held a mug of coffee, a thin wisp of steam rising from it. He didn't turn around when I entered, as if he had already sensed my presence. "How long have you been here?" My voice sounded a bit hoarse. "About an hour," he replied, still looking at the water. I needed some time to see this place again. I understood what he meant. I dropped my bag on one of the sofas and walked over to stand next to him, looking at the same landscape. The lake was calm that morning, a leaden gray color. I remembered standing in this exact spot with Crispin 3 years ago after a miscarriage. Crispin had held me tightly. He promised that we would overcome everything together, that this place would bear witness to us rebuilding our happiness. That promise now felt like poison. The last time I was here was 3 years ago, I said quietly, more to myself than to Barnaby. After losing our first baby, Barnaby finally turned and looked at me. In his tired eyes, there was a glimmer of compassion. The understanding of a man who knows what loss feels like. Saffron desperately wanted children too, he said softly. After 2 failed IVF cycles, she stopped talking about it. I thought it was because it was too painful for her. Turns out her mind was occupied with something else. We fell back into silence, each lost in our own pain. There were no tears, only a heavy stillness full of unspoken words and broken promises. In that silence, we found a strange connection. We weren't friends or even good acquaintances. We were 2 wounded souls standing in the ruins of our marriages trying to find a way not to collapse with them. Do you think we're taking this too far? A tiny sliver of doubt crept into my mind. Barnaby slowly shook his head, his gaze returning to the lake. No. Maybe if this was just for revenge, but it's not. It's about forcing them to face reality without any sugarcoating. It's about taking back the truth that was stolen from us. His words gave me strength. Yes, he was right. It wasn't about hurting them. It was about stopping our own pain, about closing a chapter in a way that left no unanswered questions, no room for further manipulation. Then let's set the stage, I said, my voice growing firmer. We sprang into action not like hosts preparing for a party, but like forensic investigators reconstructing a crime scene. Every movement we made was imbued with meaning, a silent ritual. I started by wiping down the long wooden dining table in the center of the room, the table where Crispin and Saffron had likely sat, planning their next lie. I scrubbed the surface until it gleamed, as if trying to erase the traces of their betrayal. Barnaby went out to his car and came back with a bottle of red wine. Saffron's favorite, he said, placing the bottle in the center of the table. A small detail that inflicted immense pain. I took 4 crystal glasses from the kitchen cabinet, the very glasses Crispin always insisted on using when we came here. It was part of his ritual to show off his refined taste. I arranged them on the table, perfectly lined up, 2 on one side, 2 on the other, the perfect setup for a confrontation. We moved 2 large armchairs so their backs were facing the entrance. That way, when they walked in, they would have no choice but to walk around them and meet us face to face. We weren't going to attack from behind. We were waiting for them head-on. We adjusted the lighting in the room so it was warm, a yellowish hue, not too bright to create unnecessary tension, but light enough so we could catch every nuance of the expressions that would soon appear on their faces. We wanted to see everything. The surprise, the guilt, the fear. How do you think they'll react? I asked as we sat down for a moment to evaluate our handiwork. The room looked so normal, so peaceful, the perfect trap. Barnaby shook his head. Saffron will cry. That's her weapon, Crispin. I don't know. Maybe he'll get angry. Maybe he'll beg. But of one thing I am certain. Neither of them will be prepared for the fact that we know everything. They won't be prepared for us. We spent the rest of the day talking. No longer about the betrayal, but about ourselves. I told him about my dream of opening a small bookstore in Cornwall. A dream Crispin had always laughed at, calling it unrealistic. Barnaby talked about how he had once almost quit architecture to go to France to study as a pastry chef. We talked about the versions of ourselves we had long lost, buried under layers of compromises and sacrifices in our marriages. Outside, the sky slowly began to turn a shade of burnt orange. The wall clock read 5 p.m. Less than an hour, I said quietly. Are you scared? Barnaby looked me in the eye. I'm not scared of the truth. I'm scared of forgiving what doesn't deserve to be forgiven. I nodded slowly. We walked out onto the deck and stood side by side, watching the sunset. A gentle breeze brought the scent of autumnal silence. Time seemed to stand still. We were ready. The stage was set. Now all that was left was to wait for the main actors to arrive. At 5:57 p.m., the air inside the house grew so thick and tense, it felt like a guitar string ready to snap. Barnaby and I sat silently in the 2 armchairs facing away from the door. We were like 2 statues waiting for the play to begin. On the table between us stood the bottle of red wine, flanked by the empty crystal glasses. Resting on the chair beside me was a thick manila envelope. Inside was all our ammunition: copies of their texts, printouts of bank statements, even a short audio recording of a call to Crispin's secretary, who casually confirmed that no client seminars were scheduled in Edinburgh for the weekend. We hadn't come empty-handed. And then we heard it, the crunch of gravel under car tires. The sound was so loud in the silence that it pierced straight through my heart. Barnaby turned and looked at me. His eyes asked a silent question. I said nothing, just gave a short, firm nod. It was time. A black SUV parked right in front of the deck. We could see it clearly through the large windows. Crispin got out first from the driver's side. He was wearing a leather jacket, carrying a small weekend bag in one hand and a gift bag in the other. He looked relaxed, happy. Saffron stepped out of the passenger side right after. In her hands, she held a bouquet of soft pink tulips. They were laughing together. The sound of their laughter, joyful and carefree, drifted faintly to us from outside. They looked like a pair of newlyweds arriving at their little paradise. The sight felt like a knife to the gut, the illusion of their happiness built upon our pain. The key turned in the lock. The wooden door creaked open. Saffron walked in first with a smile still playing on her lips. She stepped elegantly into the room. Her gaze swept across the space and then her smile froze. Literally froze halfway as if someone had hit the pause button on her life. Her eyes, shining moments before, widened, filling first with confusion, then with sheer horror as her gaze shifted from me to Barnaby sitting beside me. Crispin, walking in right behind her, bumped into her back when she stopped so abruptly. "What's wrong, darling?" His voice still sounded cheerful. Then he looked up, following Saffron's gaze, and in that second, our eyes met. I watched the transformation happen in a matter of seconds. Confusion, shock, denial, and finally, a panic so pure it was almost tangible. The gift bag slipped from his grasp. A bottle of expensive champagne inside rolled across the wooden floor and shattered against the table leg. Pop! A small burst followed by the sound of foaming liquid pouring out, filling the room with the sharp smell of alcohol. Saffron's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The bouquet of tulips slipped through her fingers. Delicate pink petals scattered across the floor. It was the perfect visual metaphor for what had just happened. Her fantasy had shattered into pieces. The silence, broken only by the clinking of shattered champagne glass, returned heavier and more suffocating than before. I let the moment drag on for a few seconds so they could fully grasp their reality. Then I spoke. "Welcome to your weekend." My voice sounded light, like a breeze, serene, in stark contrast to the electrified atmosphere. We prepared the wine, the seats, and the truth. Crispin was paralyzed. His lips pressed into a tight line. His face went pale. Saffron took a half step back, darting a glance at Barnaby, as if looking for help. A way out of this nightmare. But there was no way out. There was nowhere to hide. The curtain had risen. The performance had begun. The shards of the broken champagne bottle glistened on the wooden floor, reflecting the warm light of the room. The sharp smell of alcohol now mixed with the scent of trampled, wilting tulips. In the midst of this little chaos, the four of us remained motionless, locked in a surreal tableau. Crispin was the first to move, the first to try and pick up the pieces of the reality that had just shattered into 1,000 fragments. "Elara," he started, his voice raspy. He took a step forward, raising a hand as if trying to calm me down, as if I were a wild animal that needed taming. A dry laugh, devoid of any amusement, escaped my lips, the cliché opening, the first line of defense for any caught cheater. "Oh, I see," I said, tilting my head slightly. "And what exactly is this supposed to look like? Explain it to me, Crispin. What am I supposed to think about Saffron's text, saying she couldn't wait to see you at our cottage, or the lingerie set she bought especially for you?" Crispin's face contorted. He clearly hadn't expected me to know such specific details. His eyes darted to Saffron in a panic. I continued, my voice steady and even like a prosecutor reading the charges. "What am I supposed to think about the credit card charges at high-end restaurants in Marylebone we've never been to together? Or the taxi receipts showing you being dropped off in Saffron's neighborhood on nights you claim to be working late in the city?" Every question was a precision strike. I knew it by the way his shoulders slumped, the way he avoided my gaze. It was Barnaby's turn to stand. He didn't look at Crispin. His eyes were locked on his wife, Saffron, who was trembling by the door. "And what about me, Saffron?" Barnaby asked. His deep voice shook, with suppressed emotion. What am I supposed to think? You told me you were going to a corporate retreat in the Lake District with your colleagues. You even texted me last night right before turning your phone off. Good night. I miss you. Did I make that up too? Barnaby's question broke through Saffron's defenses. The tears she had been holding back finally burst forth. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Barnaby, please don't do this, she managed to squeeze out between sobs. Don't do what? Barnaby's voice rose an octave. His pain was now audible. Don't stand here and look you in the eye? Don't listen to the truth? Don't watch my wife cheat on me in a house I designed with my own hands? That last phrase was a low blow. Even for me, this house was his creation. Every corner was a manifestation of his art and his love, and they had desecrated it. I walked over to the table and picked up the thick envelope I had prepared. I didn't open it. I just tossed it onto the table with a loud enough smack to grab their attention. I didn't come here to fight, I said. My voice took control of the room once again. I came with facts. Crispin stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. In a fit of anger and desperation, he snatched it up and ripped it open. He pulled out the stack of papers. I watched his eyes dart rapidly across the lines. Watched his face change at the sight of the printed text logs, the photographic evidence, the bank statements. His eyes, previously full of panic, now turned red with rage. After a few seconds, he slammed the papers onto the floor. You spied on me, he yelled, finally losing control. I looked him straight in the eye, unblinking. I didn't spy on you, Crispin. I confirmed the truth. A truth I had suspected for far too long. And since you were so meticulous in your lies, I had to be even more meticulous to find them. Saffron collapsed into one of the dining chairs. Her body shook with sobs. Barnaby didn't move an inch to comfort her. He stood there looking at his wife with a mixture of disappointment, anger, and profound sadness. How long? Barnaby asked Saffron. His voice dropped low again, sounding much colder. 7 months, Saffron whispered. 7 months. 210 days of lies. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. For those 7 months, I had still been trying to be a good wife, trying to fix what I thought was going wrong in our marriage, unaware that I was fighting alone. Crispin walked toward me again, this time with a pleading look. Alara, I messed up. I know I made a terrible mistake, but that doesn't mean I stopped loving you. I took a step back, creating distance between us. Stop, I said, my voice wavering for the first time, not from sadness, but from an anger that had finally reached its peak. Don't talk to me about love, Crispin. If the love you're talking about is the kind that allows you to cheat on me with another woman, I don't want it. I paused, letting a bitter memory surface, glancing around the room. And if the love you're talking about is the kind that allows you to bring your mistress to the exact place where we lost our baby, then you can keep it. My words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Absolute silence fell over the room. Even Saffron's sobbing stopped. I saw Crispin freeze. He looked as if he had been slapped across the face. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. That memory, our deepest wound, was the ultimate weapon he could never fight against. I gave him one last look. You can leave now, or you can sit down and listen to the end. But if you think there's still a chance for forgiveness, then you don't know who I am at all. Barnaby turned to Saffron, then looked at me. I need some fresh air. I nodded. Me too. The two of us walked out, brushing past Crispin and Saffron, who remained rooted to their spots. We stepped out onto the deck, leaving the two of them among the wreckage of the lies we had just blown apart. Outside, the Cumbrian sky had grown almost completely dark. The wind rustled through the trees harder than before. The storm was just beginning. After spending a few minutes on the deck, letting the crisp air clear our heads, we went back into the living room. The atmosphere inside felt post-apocalyptic. Crispin and Saffron were now sitting on chairs far apart, avoiding eye contact. The papers detailing their betrayal were scattered across the floor like dead autumn leaves. The air was thick with regret and painful truths. I pulled up a chair and sat directly across from Crispin. Barnaby sat next to me. His cold, direct gaze was fixed on Saffron. For a long time, no one said a word until I placed a second folder on the table. It was burgundy, unlike the first envelope. I felt the atmosphere shift instantly. Crispin, I began, looking him in the eyes. Did you ever tell Saffron why we've had separate bank accounts for the last 6 years? Crispin's body tensed. He looked at me with a pleading expression. Alara, that has nothing to do with, I'll tell her, I interrupted, cutting off his excuse. I shifted my gaze to Saffron, who was now looking at me in confusion. You probably don't know this, Saffron, but this man you admire so much, Crispin, racked up over £70,000 in credit card debt in 2018. His parents had to secretly bail him out to save his corporate career. After that, I had to separate our finances. Not out of distrust, but because I saw firsthand how well he could hide something so massive. The shock on Saffron's face was genuine. I'm sure, Crispin, you never told her about that because it has nothing to do with today, I continued calmly. It has everything to do with the lying, Crispin. You justified your affair by telling your mistress that I was too busy, too cold. But you forgot to mention that I was the one carrying the bulk of our financial burden. I was the one paying the mortgage on this house every month while you played around and lied behind my back. Crispin lowered his head. He had nothing left to say. My truth had disarmed all his excuses. Now it was Barnaby's turn. His voice, firm but icy, was directed at Saffron. And you, Saffron, you told me the bank was delaying the loan approval for our roof repairs, but in reality, you transferred £15,000 to a rehab center in Surrey. The recipient, Julian Thorpe, your brother, right? Saffron was speechless. Her face turned even paler. I didn't want to upset you. No, Barnaby said. You didn't want to share the truth. You lived two lives, one with me, one with Crispin. And the worst part is both were built on secrets. You lied to me about your family's problems, and I'm sure you didn't tell Crispin about them either. Silence reigned in the room once again. I nodded slowly. That's the only thing the two of you have in common, I said, looking back and forth between Crispin and Saffron. You were never honest with us, your spouses, or even with each other. You only presented a beautifully packaged version of yourselves that you thought the other person would like. Saffron started crying again. I didn't want it to go this far, but you let it happen, I shot back. I don't know what hurts more, being betrayed or realizing that the person who betrayed you doesn't even have the courage to admit they were wrong from the very beginning. Crispin lifted his head. His eyes were red. I'm sorry, Alara. I really am. I'm so sorry. I looked at him, a drop of pity mixed with my anger. Sorry doesn't change the facts, Crispin. And love, if it ever existed at all, cannot save a marriage that has rotted from the roots. Barnaby stood up. He no longer looked angry, just infinitely exhausted. You know what the most hurtful part is, Saffron? He said. It's not the cheating. It's the fact that you never, not for a single second, thought about trusting me with your problems. You decided I wasn't worthy of sharing your burdens. Just when it seemed all the cards of their deceit were on the table, when we thought nothing else could surprise us, Saffron suddenly stood up. Her hands gripped the edge of the chair. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was something else in them, a mix of fear and confusion. There's something else I haven't said. Her voice trembled. All eyes turned to her. Barnaby frowned. Crispin looked at her suspiciously. Saffron swallowed hard. Her eyes darted to Crispin and then rested on me. I'm pregnant. Absolute silence hung in the room. A silence so profound that the ticking of the wooden wall clock sounded deafening. Every second was like a blade slicing through the air. Crispin jumped out of his chair. What? What did you say? Saffron nodded. Her lips trembled. I found out last week. I was going to tell you here this weekend. She directed that last sentence at Crispin. Barnaby froze. His expression was unreadable. Then he asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Is it his? Saffron turned to Barnaby. Tears streamed down her cheeks again. Yes, I'm sure. Crispin and I always used protection. My world seemed to flip upside down. For a few seconds, my mind went completely blank. Nobody had prepared us for this. There was no script. There was no plan on how to handle the ticking time bomb that had just detonated in the middle of us. The introduction of a new life changed the entire dynamic of this confrontation, turning it into something far more complex, far more painful. Saffron's confession hung in the thick air. The time bomb had detonated soundlessly, but its impact was devastating. A new life conceived in the midst of a sea of lies and destruction. For a moment, my mind completely shut down. The scenario I had so carefully planned, the confrontation I had so coolly controlled, had just been thrown into a dimension of unpredictable chaos. Crispin was the first to recover from the shock. But his reaction wasn't that of a man who just found out his mistress was pregnant. There was surprise, yes, but horror and disgust dominated. His eyes darted from Saffron's face to her stomach and back. You're pregnant with his kid? he asked in a strangled voice. He jerked his chin toward Barnaby. The way he said his with such disdain made it sound as if this pregnancy was an annoying complication, a stain on his perfect escape from reality. And for the first time that evening, I saw a flash of real anger on Saffron's face. Through her sobs and swollen face, she shot Crispin a piercing glare. "Don't call him his," she hissed. "He has a name. He is Barnaby, my husband. And yes, I made a mistake betraying him. But at least I never lied to him about how I felt about you." Saffron's words were a double slap to Crispin. First, the confirmation that the child wasn't his. Second, the implicit accusation that Crispin's love for me was nothing more than a lie. I watched Crispin take a step back. His face morphed into an impenetrable mask. Shock, shame, or perhaps the absolute emptiness of a man realizing he has lost everything. He had lost me, and it seemed he had never truly possessed Saffron. He was just a rest stop, a temporary escape. While the three of them were swept up in this new drama, I felt something strange: clarity. Saffron's pregnancy was a shock, but it changed nothing for me. It was her problem. It was the consequence of their actions. Her chaos was no longer my chaos. This complicated knot that had just been tied actually only strengthened my resolve to cut the threads binding me to all of them. I took a deep breath, calming my momentarily racing pulse. I became the Alara I knew again, the financial director, calm, methodical, always focused on the bottom line. I think that's enough surprises for one evening. My voice sliced through the tension between them. I leaned forward and picked up my bag from the floor, opened it, and pulled out the final burgundy folder. I placed it slowly on the coffee table next to the untouched bottle of wine. And since all the cards are on the table, I'm not going to drag this out. I opened the folder. Inside was a stack of perfectly folded papers. "These are the divorce papers. And all the financial documentation I prepared," I explained. "Our shared assets have already been legally separated into individual accounts. Everything has been reviewed by my solicitor. Unlike certain people in this room, I hide nothing." Crispin looked at the papers in disbelief. "Alara, you can't. You can read them now or refuse to sign," I continued, ignoring the plea in his voice. "But it won't change my decision." Across the room, Saffron sat back down. Her hands instinctively wrapped around her stomach. Barnaby turned to her. The coldness on his face slowly dissolved, giving way to an expression of exhaustion and resignation. "I need time to process all this," he said to Saffron. His voice was low but controlled. "But if you're keeping this baby, I will take care of it. The child is not to blame for any of this." I saw a glimmer of relief in Saffron's eyes. She nodded, too choked by sobs to speak. "I know. Thank you for saying that." I looked back at Crispin. "I don't know if you have anything left to say, but if you do, now is the time." He lifted his head. His eyes were red, exhausted. "Alara," he said, None of this is worth destroying our marriage over. We had so many good memories." There it was, his final card. "The memories." I nodded. "That's true, Crispin. We had a lot of good memories. But the fact that you chose to trade them all for the cheap thrill of an affair with someone who wasn't even honest with her own husband means that I have to protect the rest of my life from your bad decisions." I pulled a pen from my jacket pocket. With firm strokes, I signed every page where my signature was required. In the quiet room, the sound of the pen tip gliding across the paper was distinct. Every stroke was a liberation. I was no longer clinging to a fragile marriage. I was no longer trying to trust someone who didn't deserve it. Setting the pen down, I felt lighter than I had in years. I looked at Crispin, the man who had once been my entire youth, my family's dream. "Good luck," I told him. "You're going to need it." As I stood up, Barnaby stood up as well. He gave a respectful nod. "I'll wait for you by the cars, Alara. If you need anything, let me know." I nodded, grateful for his calm presence that evening. Just as I was about to walk out, Saffron hesitantly approached me. "I know I don't deserve to ask for forgiveness," she said quietly. "But I really never meant for it to go this far." I looked her straight in the eyes. The anger was gone. There was only clarity. "The most dangerous people aren't the ones who are openly bad," I told her. "They're the ones who convince themselves they are good people while continuing to live a lie." She froze at my words for a moment, then turned away. I walked out of the house without looking back, leaving Crispin staring at the papers on the table, and Saffron huddled in the corner, clutching the only thing she had left to hold on to. The life she had just confessed was growing inside her. We left the cottage around 9 p.m. No one walked us out, there was no need. We walked in silence. Only the crunch of gravel under our feet broke the quiet of the night. Barnaby opened my car door for me, a gesture of politeness that felt strange amidst all the chaos. Then he walked over to the driver's side of his car. Before starting the engine, he turned to me. "Do you want to get something to eat?" he asked. "I know a small pub in Lake George. It's open late. Nothing fancy, but it's comforting." I laughed. A hoarse, unexpected laugh, but it felt incredibly genuine. After all the drama, all the tears and lies, this simple question felt overwhelmingly normal. "Yes," I replied. "Let's go, I am starving." We sat side by side in the modest pub, illuminated by a slightly flickering neon sign. Warm yellow light fell on the worn wooden table in front of us. We didn't try to analyze what had just happened. Instead, we talked about calmer things, about the time Barnaby considered leaving architecture for culinary school, about my dream of opening a bookstore in Cornwall, the idea I had abandoned after Crispin called it unrealistic. After dinner, we said goodbye with a simple handshake and a silent nod. We didn't become lovers. But that night, I realized I had gained something more fundamental. A friend, someone who had walked with me through the darkest night of my life. 3 years later, time that feels like an entire lifetime, and yet it feels like it was just yesterday. I stood on the balcony of a small house in Lyme Regis, on the Dorset coast. In my hands, I held a mug of hot tea. I looked out at the waves crashing against the Jurassic coastline. The divorce from Crispin was finalized in less than 2 months. Thanks to my meticulous preparation, documentation, and clearly defined assets, he didn't put up much of a fight. He probably realized that the longer he dragged it out, the more he stood to lose. I got the majority of our assets, including a financial buyout for the cottage in the Lake District, which I sold to him. I didn't need a place full of ghosts from the past. Crispin's career in the corporate finance world stalled. His boss, a strict but fair executive, somehow caught wind of the chaos in his personal life. Officially, nothing was discussed, but he was slowly removed from key projects. From being a prime candidate for the next managing director, he was demoted to managing a second-rate team. Saffron had her baby. Barnaby sent me a text message. "She's here, a healthy baby girl. Feelings are complicated, but we're trying." He attached a photo, a tiny hand gripping Saffron's finger. Barnaby was looking at the camera with a tenderness I had never seen in him before. I didn't know if they would get back together as a couple, but it was clear that, however belatedly, they were learning to be honest with each other and with themselves. Meanwhile, I live alone in my new house by the ocean. Not too far from the hustle, but quiet enough to hear the wind every morning. I changed careers. I am no longer a corporate financial director. I am an independent financial advisor, setting my own schedule. No more high-stress board meetings. No more midnight email bombardments. I am also learning to stop, to rest, to breathe. Barnaby and I still keep in touch. Not often, but consistently. Sometimes it's just holiday greetings. Sometimes texts like, "Just saw a blueprint for a stunning Georgian-style villa down in Dorset and thought of you. It's a masterpiece." And sometimes it's just a 5-minute phone call to ask, "How are you?" I don't need anything more. We went through one of the longest nights of our lives together, and although neither of us ever said it out loud, I know we are friends. The kind of friendship that doesn't need labels, that is understood with a single glance. On that particular day, I sat on my deck with a favorite book while a soothing acoustic guitar played from a small speaker next to me. I no longer thought about Crispin. There was no more pain, no more regret, only a peace as quiet as the sea on a windless day. I had survived what once felt impossible, and most importantly, I had found myself again. Crispin was an important part of my world, but he was not my final destination. He came into my life to teach me a very expensive lesson, to wake me up and make me realize that trust shouldn't be given to someone who doesn't know how to protect it, that love doesn't last when honesty disappears, and that blind sacrifice makes us forget our own worth. If someone were to ask me now, "Alara, do you regret anything?" I would answer without hesitation, no. Because some people come into our lives not to stay, but to teach us when it's time to leave. My story is not a tragedy. It is a journey of rebirth. From a betrayed wife, I transformed into a woman who stood her ground, healed herself, and learned to love herself again. Sometimes losing something opens the path to something much better. And I am grateful that I had the courage to walk away at the most crucial moment. I sat on the porch overlooking the garden with a cup of coffee and a half-filled notebook. From here I could see my small vegetable patch. cherry tomatoes growing lushly, peppers starting to turn red, and basil leaves releasing their fresh scent with every gust of wind. In the distance stretched the Atlantic, deep and blue under the clear morning sky. 3 years ago, on a day just like this, I was sitting in a cottage in the Lake District, waiting to blow up my own world. Today, I sit here in a new world that I built on the ruins. And this world feels much more solid, much more real. I don't think about Crispin often anymore. Not because I consciously avoid it, but because he no longer occupies space in my thoughts. The memory of him has turned into an old film I watched a long time ago. I know the plot, I remember some of the scenes, but the emotions that were once so intense are now muted, replaced by a safe distance. A few months ago, an old friend from London sent me a text. She bumped into Crispin at a real estate expo. She told me he looked different, thinner, much quieter. He left his old firm a year after our divorce and was now working for a smaller developer in Birmingham. He had moved to a different city, starting from scratch. I read the message and felt nothing. No satisfaction from his karma, no residual pain, just a calm realization. His story was no longer mine. He was a stranger with whom I had once shared a bed for years. I prayed that he had found peace not for his sake, but for mine, because wishing him peace meant I was truly free. My connection with Barnaby survived, transforming into a genuine and rare friendship. We video call once a month. His call caught me while I was watering the plants. His face appeared on the screen, still wearing that characteristic tired smile, but now there was a sparkle in his eyes that wasn't there before. Behind him, a little curly-haired girl was running around and laughing. "This is Nina. She finally learned how to pronounce my name right," Barnaby said with a soft smile as Nina hugged his leg. "It took her 2.5 years to decide if I'm Barnaby or Daddy Barnaby." I smiled. "You look happy. She is my world," Barnaby replied. He paused, his gaze turning more serious. "Saffron and I tried. We are good parents to Nina, but as a couple, we realized you can't fix what is already broken. We decided to separate amicably 6 months ago. It's better this way. More honest, no more secrets, no more pretending, just a partnership in raising our daughter." The news didn't surprise me. Some cracks are too deep to patch over. "I'm sorry, but I'm glad you found an honest path," I said. "Yeah, honesty. An expensive lesson," he said. "And you, Alara? Has some lucky guy managed to steal your heart out there on the coast?" "My heart isn't available to be stolen right now. I'm too busy owning it myself, and it's an incredibly satisfying feeling. My work as a financial advisor had given me a new purpose. I don't just help newly divorced women reorganize their finances. I listen to their stories. I see the same fear in their eyes that I once felt myself, the fear of the future, the fear of being alone. And I can tell them with complete conviction, you are going to be okay. You are much stronger than you think, because I am the living proof. I became a lighthouse for ships that once sailed into the same storm I did. I turned my scars into a map so others could find their way back to themselves. As the sun began to dip toward the west, I closed my notebook and walked down to the beach in front of my house. I took off my sandals, letting the warm sand touch my feet and the sea foam wash over them. People often ask me, "Did you forgive Crispin?" For a long time, I didn't know the answer. But now, I understand. Forgiveness wasn't the goal. I didn't need to grant him my forgiveness in order to heal. What I needed was acceptance. Accepting that it all happened. Accepting that I was once so deeply hurt. Accepting that the pain changed me. And most importantly, forgiving myself. Forgiving myself for not seeing the signs sooner. Forgiving myself for once being so naive in love. Forgiving myself for thinking I needed someone else to be whole. I no longer feel empty. I am whole on my own, but I am not lonely. My life might be quieter, but it is infinitely more peaceful. It is filled with the little things. The smell of coffee in the morning, the joy of watching plants grow, the laugh of a client when she finally buys her first car with her own money, and of course, the sound of the waves constantly whispering to me. The sky transformed into a canvas of orange, pink, and purple hues. For me, a new dawn had arrived a long time ago. And every day, I am grateful for that dawn because I know how hard I fought to get here. I don't look back anymore. The future stretches out before me, as vast and beautiful as the ocean I am looking at. And for the first time in my life, I am not afraid to explore it alone. Thank you all for watching to the end. I hope this story sparks your interest in these life themes. If it touched you, please leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel. Let's spread positive energy together and keep the light shining. Thank you.